If you've ever been to a wedding, a major sporting event, a drunken karaoke night, or a middle school dance, then you probably know this song. Or maybe this one. That, of course, is Wonderwall by Oasis. And before that, Song 2 by Blur, which is sometimes just straight up called Woohoo. Those were two of the biggest songs to emerge from the United Kingdom since the days of the Beatles, the Stones, and the British Invasion. But in the 90s, before the internet, the average music fan outside of Great Britain had no idea that Blur and Oasis were spearheading a whole new musical wave. It was a wave that would rule Britannia, dominating the UK charts, selling millions of records, seeding bitter rivalries, and shifting the landscape of British pop and politics. This is Britpop. Ah, jolly old England, the land of dreary weather, stately palaces, the Union Jack, bobbies on the beat, the Queen, quaint countrysides, and a cheese farmer who was at the very centre of one of the most important music movements in pop history.
What do you think or feel when you hear the word Britpop?
Every time I hear the word Britpop, a little part of me dies. I'm sorry, I know you're making a programme about how brilliant it all was, but bollocks. The most important thing that happened in British culture in the 90s was that art got really good. And Blur had come out of this place where that whole thing started, Goldsmiths College, at our first ever rehearsal. We wrote our first single. Right from the get-go, we just made a really good noise together. But by 1992, we'd been mismanaged to the extent that we had quite a big tax bill to pay, one that's enforceable by imprisonment if you can't pay it. So we fired our manager, and the only way to pay off the tax man was to commit to an enormous tour of America. We went to America the day that Nirvana's album Nevermind came out. That record changed everything, and we arrived bankrupt with the old agenda. You know, it's kind of a buzzkill. All the music press were talking about grunge. It was the latest thing. British music was completely irrelevant. So we had this huge 3-month saga of a steeplechase, drinking really heavily, playing shows in pubs and clubs where nobody thought what we were doing was relevant at all.
It was quite a depressing and frustrating time, really. Grunge was huge in the charts, and we were a small band in the UK and completely unheard of outside the big cities in the States. I remember specifically we went to a place called Miles City, kind of laughingly called City because it was about 3 houses and a truck stop. We got off the bus and somebody came running up and asking for our autograph. It was amazing. Our fame has spread even to Miles City. It turned out they'd never met an English person before. The vastness of America took us by surprise. We've driven the length and breadth of the UK, which is just about fits into one of the medium-sized states in America. On those interminably long US drives, that's where we kind of had discussions and ideas about how has American culture shaped English culture, kind of reimagining what would British pop music sound like if Elvis hadn't happened. We talked about stuff ad nauseum at length. It was the genesis of what we did next.
When we got back from that American tour, it just completely gave us a sense of who we are. I don't think you really understand where you come from until you're taken out of that situation. Just made us realise British culture's been completely marginalised. We went into the studio with the idea of writing something very determinedly British, something incredibly left field, and it's really different from grunge. The record company were aghast. They threw their hands in the air and said, British pop, you're mad, never going to work.
I get up and I watch, except on Wednesdays when I get rudely awakened by the dustman. I put my trousers on, have a cup of tea, and I think about leaving the house. I feed the pigeons. I sometimes feed the sparrows too. It gives me a sense of enormous well-being.
We like to play a festival and we just read in the part life. So should we start with that then? Did the drum start doing the bass drum and they're all like, whoa, we like this. Hands in the air, they're jumping up and down. And we got to the chorus and a pair of knickers hit Damon and a bra hit me in the face. I was like, wow, something's just changed.
Main music program on TV at the time. There were only 4 channels on the TV, not the 4,000 that there are now. And so an appearance on that, and pretty much every young person in the country would see. And suddenly we were playing much larger shows. We were getting mobbed. Supplanted kind of tail end of grunge and completely pushed out what was going on. It was as if suddenly it was okay to be British, it was okay to be English again. We didn't have to be embarrassed. There was definitely something in the air at that time.
Blur's success with Park Life made the English music press take notice. Now the thing is, England is what you might call a monoculture. There's one time zone, a handful of TV stations, and in the days way before the World Wide Web, just 4 music magazines, all based in London. These magazines had a voracious appetite for stories and an insatiable need to find the next big thing.
Britain at that time, there was being suffocated by American rock and American culture. Grunge was all about bearing your soul and singing from the heart and being authentic and being real and credible and not having any frills or any artifice. And to quote the Smiths, it said nothing to me about my life. The pop tradition of this country is a bit more playful, postmodern, about the knowing wink. That had gone away for at least half a decade. Blur, they were pioneers of British guitar rock in the tradition of the Kinks, of that kind of playfulness. And the press ran with it, and next thing you know, the seeds of Britpop had been sown.
Southern Press was a publicity firm, and we were very intimately involved in PRing the bands at the time. You know, a lot of them hung around in our office, and we did photo sessions in the office, and we basically together going around London together. We found bands quite young in their career, often stumbling across them in pubs. We found Suede in a local pub, and then packed about 10 people in an even smaller pub, an Echo Belly. It happened to us very, very quickly. One of the first shows that we ever did, it was so random, it was illegally round, you couldn't breathe in there. The ceiling actually collapsed when we carried on performing. It was full of local company. There was definitely a buzz going on, and the press was so determined to create a scene. You had to be in with the right journalists. You had to basically have a kind of authentic Britishness about you. You had to look a certain way. I remember going to a pub in Soho, and there was Blur sitting in the corner wearing the same clothes as us, and we just clocked each other, and it was like a kind of something in the air, knowing in that scene, if you tick the right boxes, you literally rode away.
This thing is still not called Britpop. I don't think that word's even kicking around. But it's pretty obvious that being in a 4-piece indie group, influenced somewhat by the past, there's money in those hills, right? I can remember being asked to write a piece celebrating how great British music had got. 10 great Britpop moments. And I don't know why I chose that word. I just needed a word. And I probably nicked it from somewhere else. But by the spring of 95, it's kind of everywhere.
We in the press were sitting around desperately waiting for something to happen. We were looking for people with personalities. We were looking for characters to write about. When a handful of bands came along who were vaguely similar, nostalgic, retro, very English, we were only too keen to group them together under this banner of Britpop. Britpop was all about discovering a new band every week. We were very much A&R. We were the talent scouts. We would discover these brand new bands and write about them and put them on the front cover. You would hear stories about this group here had been a heavy metal group until 3 weeks ago, and then they'd all gone out and bought Fred Perry shirts, and they were suddenly singing songs about cups of tea. Sometimes you kind of keep the music much the same as it was, but just change the clothes you were wearing, and hey presto, you were part of this move.
My band, we were sort of scooped up into Britpop. We were more of a kind of DIY punk aesthetic. And then by the time we got to our first album, we were all like wearing bowler necks. We were teenagers, so we didn't know any different. It was a really fun time to be young and in a band.
The money was sloshing around in the music industry. People were buying guitar records who'd never bought guitar records before. You had bands like Lush, previously part of the shoegazing movement, who started selling a lot of records because of Britpop.
Lush started as a shoegaze band and was kind of post-punk. It was actually almost anti-commercial. One of the criticisms of Lush was that it could have been this pop band, yet they mucked it up by sort of putting too many guitar effects. Not understanding that we like that bit, actually, that's why we do it. But there was a part of me that thought, don't be scared of the hit. Here's the hand claps and the bit where all the music drops out and the little, you get a picture, you know, and let's give it a go then. Grunge at their worst had a bit of pompousness about them, you know, that were a bit humorless. Oh, come on, you know, let's not be that serious. You know, that's you didn't have to be scared of the thing outside of you.
Good evening, I'm David from Blur, and I'm here to introduce myself to some of the best bands in Britain. We're performing live here in the studio on Britpop now. 3 years ago, if you were in a band that was not Nirvana or a Diet Nirvana, you were nothing. Well, I think that's changed now. British bands no longer embarrassed to sing about where they come from. They found their voice.
All of these groups, they were all kind of London-based groups, and they were kind of true to the classical art school notion of British music, right? They thought they were making albums, and they were, right? Then comes this 5-piece band from Manchester led by these 2 brothers who basically knock on the door and say, never mind all that rock and roll. It's like someone gate crashing a party.
Oh, Oasis came out of the northern factory city of Manchester. They were part of a long line of bands that included the Buzzcocks, Joy Division, the Smiths, Happy Mondays, and the Stone Roses. See, this north-south divide is a big thing in the United Kingdom. The middle-class south is depicted as stuffy, pretentious, and, well, a bit soft. Meanwhile, the other end of the country is typically seen as working class and a bit grim up north. But one label head hailing from way up in Scotland was bent on recruiting northern bands and throwing a spanner into the Britpop works.
Creation tended to sign middle-class bands. We never really signed middle-class bands. I mean, I was just signed an Aristocrats in a Mason tune, you know. So I was a snob about it. Glasgow's having a City of Culture week. The pubs were open all night, and I walked in, and there's a lot of messy altercation between this band and the two Scottish security guys. And a deal was broken because I kind of said, "Oh, right, just let them go for 2 songs, whatever." To make the play properly, all start up in Sky, and then when the Beatles come up to band the Wallace, everybody decent with the Beatles covers. At that point, I thought, like, that's fucking amazing. And I said, "Who's in charge for the band?" So this guy, no, so I couldn't get him. No doubt, because and I was like, "I'm the deal for British Records for you." I mean, it's the best news I've ever made for your life.
Oasis played live, I was absolutely staggered by it. It's all like it's a UFO had landed. Bang! What were these aliens? They didn't smile. They didn't try to endear themselves to the audience. They didn't do the, "Hey, how's everybody doing?" They just played their songs and left the stage. If you like, it's great. If you don't, fuck off. They came from a little working class area of Manchester. They lived in a council house. And one of the things about Manchester is they do have a bit of a chip on their shoulder about London. So he was this working class man, foul mouthed, and didn't give a shit.
ドアの横に置いていただけますか？はい。ありがとうございます。
I mean, you can take the Britpop and stick it as far at the back end saying, "The country house, if you can take it." We're a universal rock band, we're not Britpop. Oasis were going to get big, whether they called it Britpop or not. I can't like the door for Oasis, but Oasis were very different. Well, really, really different kind of music. Calling them Britpop. It was just a convenient tag for the media.
I remember seeing Oasis for the very first time. The songs were absolutely astonishing. Yeah, a bit they were like working class guys but from up north. You know, so it was things like that. Just they were. There's a lot of edge and there's a lot of great things that come out of working class culture because we have something to fight about. Our stories are different. Oasis had a legitimate backing from working class culture in a way that a lot of the other artists that made it at the time didn't. They were on the same label, so they put us on the tour together. And there was such a level of authentic admiration from working class boys. It was quite shocking to see, but it was real. It wasn't media made. And you only had to step outside the bubble of trendy British London to see how much love there was for that band.
Became all guns blazing, all swagger, all attitude, and I think everybody else just didn't know what to do with that. Oasis kind of fit into that lad culture, which was much more of a tabloid area of interest than Britpop ever would be.
Right.
That's what Oasis were doing. Being hugely successful, drinking loads, taking lots of drugs, barely knowing what they were. That was the kind of loaded magazine dream.
What about Justin Velasquez? Do you really fancy her then?
Yeah.
Can you go for her?
No, she's going to go for me.
It was the press. I just remember them absolutely wetting themselves with delight. You know, blokes who were quite dull people who suddenly felt that this was their liberating moment. You know, I went to a photo shoot with the NME. Suddenly it's all like, "Oh, can you turn up in a bikini?" And kind of like spray some champagne everywhere. It was like, "Fuck me doing it," do you know what I mean?
And that culture was just not just Oasis, it was everywhere. We all got a bit sexist, we all got a bit like traditionally white male. Like, really? Are we going backwards? I didn't really identify with that. It was just something the Straights were doing.
I don't think anybody expected the Oasis to be also big so quickly. Once Oasis arrived, the attitude became slightly more lavish, because they thought, we're getting left behind here, we've got to try and pretend to be a bit more push.
Were kind of middle class boys, and they were kind of trying to dumb down. They were putting on Fred Perry's and sort of singing Cockney accents and Part Life, Paul Blimey Kings and all that. I mean, they were good records, but it just didn't sit well with Oasis.
Wasn't really part of any planned games or fight with another band, but you know, it's a lot of kind of arrogant, cocksure young men, and it's the fact that there was just massive amounts of booze involved. Things were bound to go right.
exaggerate to be the shit out of Oasis. I don't think so. And they wouldn't want me to be. I'm not even saying I want to be voices. I'm actually saying that they're just being encouraged to be these sort of dirty, sexual.
Also, just sort of, again, let's judge how serious Oasis were about the whole thing. If they wanted to kill, well,
Spurred on by the Manchester lads of Oasis, Britpop blasted out to London and became a national obsession. Now the Northerners were eating the Londoners for dinner, and things were getting tense. The evening news and tabloids reached a massive circulation, much bigger than the music press, and they stoked up the fervour between classes and cultures across the country. Today, this would be a Twitter flame war lasting no more than a few hours, but back then, for one whole week, all eyes were on the battle of Britpop.
I've always been extremely careful to make sure that our release dates fitted in comfortably with the opposition's. It made no sense for us to collide directly with our main competitors, which at the time was Oasis. Someone said in the pub or something, you know, Oasis had put their record out at the same time. No. I don't think so. We're having a bit of a laugh. They don't mind me that way. We assumed that they would be complying with common sense in terms of their release schedule. Except common sense, but Oasis don't necessarily go hand in hand.
They accused us of leaving our singles to Pop Sound theirs. The reality of it is, if they know that they brought our singles to Pop Sound ours, they know that's what we've done. They know that.
It's bloody obvious. It's not how shit. When we started it, we were just despondent.
They announced the release date for their new single. So we thought, right, we'll announce ours on the same day then, go up against them head to head. They then, I think still to this day, rather cowardly moved their release date so they wouldn't no longer clash with us, and then we moved ours again. So they did.
Two of Britain's most popular pop groups have begun the biggest chart war in 30 years. From Manchester band Oasis, their arch rival Blur released new singles today, each hoping to reach the #1 spot next week. The music industry hasn't heard anything like it since the Beatles sorted out with the Rolling Stones in the 60s.
The pop world is buzzing at the confrontation between Oasis and Blur. Both bands are desperate to get the #1 slot. There's a lot at stake. Neither wants to finish second.
The rivalry between Oasis and Blur is bitter. Both groups actively dislike each other.
I think I get much of rock and roll, not Chaz and Dave, similar sleeping music.
We released a single on the same day because it was either or punch up. And we thought there'd be less bloodshed.
You know, just saying something, rolling with it, and dealing with your circumstances as they are. Versus a song that's literally called country house, which is something that rich people have. There's nothing better than a good old battle of two bands that really fucking hate each other. It's almost like the Republicans and the Democrats, isn't it? It's really good run, everybody.
Anyone can put whatever onto this chart war and say this is about Beatles versus Stones, rock and roll, it's art music. It was a blank canvas for people to write whatever piece they wanted.
Into the laps of the press falls not just two records coming out on the same day, but the North versus the South, the middle class versus the working class. Everyone went crazy.
Today, 9 seem to be drawn along the North-South divide. In London, Blur were favourite.
Come to London, that's why it's called Blur.
Probably Blur fan, I want to get number 1.
Places, that's all.
Keep the Manchester African. Wait a minute.
Got any ways to play better following?
Not in Manchester, I just don't think they have much podcast.
I mean, the whole country was obsessed with that. It was on Music 10. They don't get pop music on Music 10.
It wasn't just like music, actual things happening in the world, which were pushed out of the way by journalists standing outside record shops interviewing people saying, what's the right Blur Oasis?
People would go to swimming pools, book his money on this great battle. Oasis were favourites to be #1 record from the 64. The whole thing was.
What about down there?
And the entire country seemed to decide which side they were on.
It was insane. I to see why that would be important, but it mattered. For some reason, it mattered. Blur Oasis.
Blur won the Battle of Britpop, as it later became to be known. We should have won an award for that. That was the marketing event of the decade, really.
I wouldn't say that it was the best song that Blur ever released. I don't think it was the best song that Oasis ever released. But the main reason that we became #1 that particular week was we had better formats than Oasis. Perhaps as mundane as it gets. Our missiles were better than their missiles.
I think we had 2 CD singles, 7-inch, 12-inch. So they had an extra format. to be honest, it's the best thing that ever happened to Oasis. Oasis at that point were like 500,000 albums had written, political 2 million albums had written, going head to head, this mad rivalry. It only elevated Oasis because on News 10 they got us that kind of exposure. They were marketed very cynically. We just put records in the shops or whatever happened, but I mean, it was like we went out on the 2 and they went out on the 1, but it was back when Strawberry Fields went out on the 2 and England went up and England went up. Same thing. It hurt when they lost that battle. When Country House was number 1 and Rose it was number 2, they tried to cover it up, but you know, as I said to them, you probably lost the battle, but you're going to win the war.
While not achieving historical significance on the level of the Battle of 1066, the Battle of Britpop ground blurred the titular heads of the movement, with Country House their first number 1 until Peak Bum 2 years later. Oasis were left to lick their wounds, but they were about to throw a big counterpunch.
Today is gonna be the day that they're gonna throw it back to you. By now, you should somehow realize what you gotta do. I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now.
I got CPR from the band, and I put it on and I thought my God was going to sell on it. Like, it's one of these records you just need to sing it. Well, I mean, I wanted that song, I managed to put it out in America. I thought it's still really wanted to go as the first single bombed, and then I quickly put it out Wonderwall.
I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now.
It's just got this kind of emotive, melodic pull to it. It kind of sounds like a song, a bit completely nonsensical. It doesn't matter. It's what it sounds like. It's not what it's saying. Oasis became as big as they were, not because of their great lyrics. Actually, this is one of their terrible lyrics. What's the Wonderwall anyway? I mean, what is it?
What was like the song about that? And after all, you're my. This is one word. It was like listen, and after that, I found the album one word. Someone said this album, that one word. And I'm like, excuse me. I was in the back of your head. After all, you're my. Yeah. What's that? Yeah. Tough stomach. See.
Wonderwall is a great song. Whenever I hear it, it kind of makes me smile. I think it was difficult for Damon every time he went to buy a pair of socks, the person in the sock shop would put on Wonderwall.
Every shop you went in London, if you hung around for 15 minutes, you would hear Wonderwall. It was all over the radio. It just became the national anthem.
It's sort of hard to critique Wonderwall now because it's grown away from its own. I mean, I thought it was going to sell 10 million records. It ended up selling 23 million records. Oasis did a great record, and it blew up.
Bands seem to come from everywhere, from the band's hometown, Manchester, from Sheffield, Newcastle, Norwich, from Liverpool, and Luton.
Oasis keep up in the antic playing Nebworth. That was just kind of mind-bogglingly huge. I think 1 in 22 of the British population applied for tickets, which meant that if you walked down a busy street in London, every 5 seconds you passed someone who was enough of an Oasis fan that they wanted to go.
We could have actually done 16 nights at Nebworth. It was kind of crazy. It was probably the peak of the Britpop thing, you know, because it was like such a big event. That became almost like the Britpop generation's Woodstock. Whether you enjoyed it or not, you just kind of had to be there. You had to say you were there, wasn't it?
Oasis star Noel Gallagher says he can barely take in the idea of playing in front of 250,000 people. With such as the scale of the success of the Manchester band, that 2 million applied for tickets. Gallagher and his brother Liam have become the rock phenomenon of the 90s.
The global success of Wonderwall showed just how massive Britpop had become. Back at home, a cultural movement called Cool Britannia sprung up in its wake and expanded Britpop's appeal to film, fashion, and even football. It was like the sweet 60s had returned. An ambitious politician named Tony Blair, head of the new Labour Party, hot moved and saw a way to appeal to youth voters by exploiting Britpop.
In arts and culture, London is a world centre. Indeed, if you ask young people the best thing about Britain, they'll probably say the pop music industry, the best in the world, where British musicians and composers now have more in foreign exchange than the steel industry.
Blair was clever. It was obviously hip and like, British music. I got a call from the House of Commons. Can you get all your bands to come to the House of Commons? Can you meet some of these bands? Can you use them to spokes people for the new Labour movement?
Taylor was always on the side of his right side. He was there at the Britpop, inducting David Bowie. He was a face that was around. He's young. He likes rock music. He's different. He's a generational change.
If you want to 25 brands, right, give me the prize. You fancy doing 25 brands.
Good to know. I will endorse New Labour. He was there at the Brit Awards saying, "Power to the people, vote Tony Blair."
I mean, I do remember seeing Oasis kind of hanging out with Tony Blair. I thought, okay, so you're now in with the establishment. I don't think they knew that much about the government. I think it was all a bit of a, love it.
Politicians, they just use you for their end and so much something for you. And once they've got that little bit of affecting glory, they're off to go fuck up some other people's shit,
Lots of people in the 90s. It's true. When that company decided to bomb it back.
victorious Labour Prime Minister at the gates of Downing Street and the piece of political history. And so to this moment, swept in on a tide of support not seen in post-war politics.
Tony Blair's election, we had a lot to do with the youth votes. The more people that like Britpop voted for Tony Blair.
Legislature came in 1997, which was the year of the Britpop comeback. We had this kind of moment. It was building and building and building to this kind of peak of excitement. And then it had to crash. I think the first time I thought the wheels were coming off Britpop was right there at the third of this album being while not being a completely terrible album by their standards, it was bloated and overblown. Those songs weren't becoming anthems. You weren't hearing some post.
Be here now. Got rave reviews even when Noel Gallagher himself thought it wasn't very good. Everybody was so sort of full of this giddy mood of isn't everything brilliant? And no one wanted to be the one to say, oh, it's finished, we better call it taxi.
Impressionably. We used to tour and it would be sold out, sold out, sold out, sold out, and it just became normal. And then, literally, I think 2 years later, I remember playing a university show and it was half empty. No one could see us because students were the first to change over. And moved on, and the next lot of students were into a different set of music. All of a sudden, Britpop was over.
You're like Sherlock Holmes, who killed it. Come on, Watson. Let's find out. Who killed Britpop? Britpop ran its course because those bands ran out of steam. Once you get yourself out of that label, then you can start going places which you find more interesting than 3 chords in a Union Jack.
You know, I think at that stage we did need to just go off and do something else. Because by that point, everybody was putting kind of trumpets on their records. And, you know, I'd be quite happy never to hear a trumpet.
You can only write about that. Isn't it great to be English at the moment? For so long, we felt we'd said what there was to say about that, the Englishness thing. And we were starting to look at modern American underground music and shifting our attention back there, really, back over that side of the pond.
It was just like back to basics, just the 4 of us. Keep it simple. Strangely, that was our biggest record.
Song 2, it did feel like a sort of 180-degree turn. Because only, 4 years before, David Almond had been telling me, I remember interviewing him saying, well, I've come to kill grunge. And then Blur makes this brilliant grunge record. It's knowing, and it's a bit camper than Nirvana ever were.
I remember I was in the pool drinking a bottle of champagne at 11 o'clock in the morning, and we got a call saying Song 2's just been added to like super heavy rotation at MTV, which basically just guarantees that you have a massive hit record. And we'll have a bottle of champagne. Yeah, it felt good, still does.
That was the time we had an American hit. I remember that. Pretty much every brand of car has used it to sell a new model. Every kind of sports team has used it with massive, great guitar and drum riff, shouting woo-hoo. What's not to like about that?
I mean, you know, they're still playing that song at local football games on there. People thought after Blur and Oasis that was kind of it. You know, what are those guys doing now? Well, actually, play stadiums in America. Blur escaped its Britpop genesis. It's incredible that the stuff that we did 25 years ago still resonates all around the world.
We made several missteps in our career, has to be said. Nowadays, if your first single doesn't chart, you can forget it. That's a shame, because it means that bands like us probably wouldn't succeed now. And obviously for me, I think that's tragic. But lots of other people, they think, thank God.
It's like the collapse of Rome. That's the terrible, terrible thing, is that kind of record company structure, which had talent scouts in every venue in London, every night of the week, that's all collapsed. All the music press is going, nobody watches telly anymore. What do you do if you want to be a drum bass player in a rock and roll band? I don't know. I started making cheese.
To be in a field with a load of people united because they love this music, to have that moment in music with everyone else, I genuinely think it's one of the closest to kind of godlike moments you can have.
The function of the music festival in today's age is a space for people to step outside of their work and life routines. I think that as life becomes increasingly pressurised, it's important to have these spaces where you can just go and walk out for a few days.
The need for human beings to have these big gatherings that we all do. There's something so deep rooted in our kind of DNA that we have to share these experiences.
To find a harmonious focus, whether it's 2 people or 200,000 people, all focused on the exact same thing at the exact same time. There's a sensation that we derive from it. You can get lost in that imagery.
It really is heaven on earth for a few days. It really is heaven on earth for a few days.
It's now just sort of taken for granted that music festivals are the most influential happenings in pop culture. A Coachella selfie or a Bonnaroo wristband is a souvenir, proof you survived a major modern ritual. Memories are made, friendships are formed, and sometimes pop stars are born. It's a musical rite of passage that gives us a glimpse into the world that produced it. All this can be traced back to the counterculture, to the heyday of hippies and bikers and radicals and freaks, to the 1960s, the summer of love, San Francisco.
There's a whole new scene now in San Francisco. A little controversial. Very interesting sound. Ladies and gentlemen, the most talked about group in the whole world at the moment. It's Jefferson Airplane.
Makes you so, and the ones that mother gives you don't do anything at all. Go ask Alice. At the center of this hazy mix of culture and politics was Jack Cassidy's psychedelic superstars, Jefferson Airplane.
So when I arrived out in California, I found a music scene unlike anything I had seen before. This was October 1965. I think it represented a group of people that was searching out some other way, trying to craft their own way in the world. The turmoil in society was an aggressive, frightening thing going on at the same time. You had a more you had a domestic situation, you had a civil rights movement going on. And it was a time where people were trying to figure out what they wanted. When I joined the Jefferson Airplane, everyone had either been to college or was in the middle of college, so they had a certain awareness of what was going on in the world. We found ourselves setting up shop and playing on flatbed trucks with our Fender equipment and just bare bones. We started playing the part and started having concerts where you could have a much huger audience. We looked around and said, "Oh boy, there's a lot of us," and we started to identify as us. I think the human being represented something.
The human being built on the popularity of the Jefferson Airplane truck jams. With even more bands, poetry, and politics, it wasn't just a concert, but an event, a convergence point for the rising counterculture, and it was big.
Well, first of all, we're in San Francisco, but you know that already. And this is Golden Gate Park. This is the Polo Fields. January 14th, 1967. This is the site of the original human being. It was organized by a fellow, I think his name is Alan Cohen, in order to get the license from the city. They said, we're going to have a protest. So we got the permit.
Revolutionary ideas mixed with groundbreaking music from Jefferson Airplane, Grateful Dead, and Blink.
At that time, different people had tribes. Grateful Dead had a tribe, Blue Cheer had a tribe, the Airplane had a tribe, and this sort of brought them all together. And you mix in the music, which was very basically peaceful, and people's idea of what this subculture was all about. People were young, and they had a sense of being without their parents involved, and without the restrictions that were imposed by society. They had their own culture, their own way of being, which is infectious. And it always has been, I think. And when you're operating in a population bubble that size, I think it's naturally going to take hold and spread. That's exactly what happened.
The human being was proof that an outdoor concert could work, and that people were into it. But the crowds had outgrown flatbed trucks. They needed a bigger stage, one that could introduce these gatherings to the rest of the world. And so the Monterey Pop Festival was born. The Monterey Pop Festival introduced the world to a brand new kind of party.
The idea of the Monterey Pop Festival came from our pop dealer.
Lou Adler and John Phillips, who really produced it. I did too, but I didn't get any credit.
Hello. Well, this is John Phillips with Mamas and Papas.
It's really hard to convince politicians in Monterey that it was going to be a peaceful concert and there would be absolutely no drugs.
100 miles from the bustle of San Francisco is Monterey, a typical sleepy California fishing village. So local residents learned that their town. Their town was chosen to hold a large festival for pop music. They were not very happy.
Major obstacle that we had was the fact that the police were afraid that it was going to turn into a melee.
There's a lot of talk of the hippies coming down, not the hippies, but the hell things coming down. Some talk about the Black Panthers coming down. If we do get 50, 55,000 people, we're going to have a lot of problems.
I don't think they made one arrest in the entire weekend. And yeah, people were smoking pot. You could smell it, you know. But the policemen were all like, I don't smell anything. Lou had 150,000 orchids flown in from Hawaii. We had an orchid on every single seat. The policemen all had orchids up and down the antennas of their motorcycles and had orchids in their helmets. It was like a love-in with the cops. It was all love and peace and people sleeping on fairgrounds, spending the entire weekend there, their kids in their tents, and people selling their wares and their tie-dyes.
I think it's going to be like Easter and Christmas and New Year's and your birthday all together, you know, hearing all different bands, you know. Just, like, I've heard a lot of them, but all at the same time, it's going to be too much, and the vibration is just going to be flowing everywhere.
It really was fun. I mean, when Ravi Shankar took the stage on Sunday afternoon, he held his audience wrapped for 3 hours. There wasn't a sound. No one got out of their seats. No one moved. Everyone just dug it. People still say to me, you know, I was at Monterey Pop. I was there for the whole weekend. It just captivated people's imagination.
Ravi Shankar, I mean, come on. I think that was the brilliance of that festival being put together. Like, from Ravi Shankar to Otis Redding to Jefferson Airplane. Over a 3-day period, everybody listened to everybody else. They really put together something unique at that time. Wherever the average audience go to hear something like that. This was born in an outdoor format festival concept where you have a number of different acts, can really represent more than just tunnel vision of a certain genre going on at the time.
After Monterey, well, things were never really the same. It sparked an explosion of music festivals across the U.S., drawing music lovers to every corner of the country. The crowds got bigger and bigger and bigger, all culminating in the big one. Woodstock saw some 400,000 people in a farmer's field, in an event that would define a generation. But even though they were a big deal, music festivals weren't exactly profitable. Even Woodstock lost money. One-off events weren't working. Festivals would need a new path forward, and they found it on a farm, in a field, across the ocean. It was here, in England, among pastures of unassuming milk cows, that the seeds were sown for what would be the biggest music festival in the world, Glastonbury. Glastonbury is the biggest music festival in the world. Its origins can be traced back to a humble farmer. This humble farmer.
Yeah, let's get it right, shall we? Yeah, good show. Far away then. So I went for my lunch.
All right. So tell me where we are now.
Where's the farm? It's the home of the Glastonbury Festival. I started 50 years ago. I started it here. And look where it's got to now. Extraordinary, really. So my family moved into this land 200 years ago. And they were Methodist preacher types, proper Methodists, kind of God-fearing.
When my dad took on the farm, when his father died, he was 19. He was always wanting to do more. He had that kind of itch, that kind of need to just do something beyond farming. The idea of a festival happened because him and my mum went to a show up the road where there was quite a few bands playing. Led Zeppelin was one of them. They were watching this band play. My dad had this moment of like, I want to do it here. I want to do it on my farm. I want to put a stage up. I want to build a stage on the farm. My mum was like, oh God, really?
That year, I sold 70 tickets at £1 each, including free milk. This is brilliant, wasn't it, really? So I had the King's booked, but they were totally unimpressed with what I was up to. I was just a dairy farm and all that, you know. So they pulled out at the last minute. And so I was like, how can I let these people down here? So I phoned around and I found out that Mark Burnham was going down to the holiday camp the same weekend, which was incredibly lucky. Because I probably would have had to cancel, I think. It was longer, it was set. It was so good. It was such a good set. And it set me up for life. It really did.
Glastonbury Festival is definitely the most important festival in the UK, and that is because it's been going the longest, I think, really, consistently the longest, you know, and it's the biggest. But I remember going to Glastonbury as my first festival, and then going to all the other ones, Reading and V, and all that, and they were tiny. I was like, where's stop now? Like 2 fields and that's it. Whereas Glastonbury kept going and you kept going and you kept going. It's bigger and bigger and bigger now. It's really massive. I think that if you walk around, you can feel like it's just got a really good energy. The whole farm, the fact that 200,000 people come in and out every year and kind of pound the ground, you know, like it's got a feeling to it, which is really positive. In 1985, something happened that would radically transform Glastonbury and music festival history. It began with an invasion of New Age travelers, a group of wanderers making their way across the rugged roadways of England. In the 80s, it was a little bit more like the Wild West, and there was a lot of battles and a lot of controversy. People just shouting in the supermarket.
But the hippie people now, no, the dirty ones. I mean, it's not fair on our own customers to have all these dirty people in here with our nice small customers. That's how I feel.
In the 80s, there was a very strong travelling community. They were kind of, people kind of opted out and they lived in caravans. They were trying to protest, so they were definitely alternative to society.
I was at a free festival at Stonehenge. That's quite an important part of the history of this event, really.
The caravans were stopped at Wiltshire, unable to get to Stonehenge.
Why don't we drive through? The vehicles causing an obstruction. Please get into the movement. Michael Heseltine, who we called Towson, he was Minister of Defence. He decided to stop that festival because it was getting too big. The army and the police went into the campsite in order to get rid of the buses, you see. They smashed the windows and stuff, made a real mess of the whole thing. There's no need to do that, really.
I have told them that I am prepared to arrest them all. Having said that, I'm asking for police officers to act with restraint at all times. What we've witnessed in the last half an hour here has been surely some of the most brutal action by police forces in Britain for a long time.
With nowhere else to go, the convoy found their way to a place offering safe haven. Many of the caravanners decided to relocate to the farm of Michael Avis, making the trek either by car or by foot. But what can they expect when they finally arrive?
We'll talk to them, we'll see what they're like, tidying up a bit, doing a bit hot shower. And so they came to me, you see, from the Battle Greenfield. They came here and I looked after them. And we made it all work together. So they changed the character of what I was doing, but putting on nice, sort of tidy pop hands to what they were doing with the campaigning against the state of the world and everything. And it fitted in really well with what we were doing. So I found a crossover between that hippie culture with my Methodism upbringing. It was all about looking after people and social equality and all that kind of thing. So that's attached to the Glastonbury ethos, really. And it's why it's so successful.
Last year I was driving my dad down onto the site and we stopped just in the middle of the Pyramid Arena and it was during this massive band and there was a huge crowd there and he just had this moment of like, oh my God, like what's this become kind of thing? And it's kind of moved and changed with the time. So each decade, and it's kind of like a mirror to like popular culture. It's representing what's happening in the outside world. It's never stood still. While some see music festivals as means reflecting society, others see them as hammers that can shape it. Back in the US, the idea of using music festival to change the world was being dreamt up not by a musician or a promoter, but by Steve Wozniak, the brainiac behind Apple computers. His idea, the US Festival, a uniquely 80s happening that combined music and technology in an era of heightened Cold War tensions.
Introducing the US Festival, an all-star lineup of the world's greatest musical groups. A multi-million-dollar spectacle coming from the deep pockets of Steve Wozniak. He spent his money, he claimed, not to make a profit, but to make a statement. Technology could transform the 80s into the S generation, replacing the me decade of the 70s.
What's the purpose of the US Festival?
Well, Priscilla, basically it's to put on a really good high-level musical event that hasn't happened in this country maybe 10 years ago. We came up with the theme of the 80s. A good theme is the idea of people working together. And I listen to the news. I read the newspaper. I attend rallies. Over and over, I hear this idea of unity, people working together. It's like I hear it in almost everything I look at. And I think that is maybe a moving theme of the 80s. And, of course, we're in tune with that at unison with our US Festival.
was always had a clear vision. It was about getting people together. It was about getting people together in an environment where they can really interact. If you take a day and you get a series of the best bands in the world together and an open spot for 100,000 or 200,000, whatever the amount of people is, it's going to be pretty cool. And so that's kind of what Woz was looking for. I was very happy that we were going to play the US Festival because it was a huge deal, And we were playing with Stray Cats and Clash and a bunch of other bands. David Bowie was headlining and all that stuff. That was incredibly exciting and really, really important because we were an Australian band, we're playing to Australian audiences, and they were going, okay, off you go. Nothing's going to be the same anymore. And indeed it wasn't. I love playing at festivals because people are there to see music. And so they're generally great audiences because that's why they're there. If it's a destination that people are going to because they want to see it perform, it's a very gratifying situation.
Woz's vision went beyond music. He wanted to use the US Festival to bridge a connection to the other side of the world.
Originally, the idea was just do a major rock country-oriented concert somewhere in the Western states. From that, the idea of, hey, we can show people how computers and technology are bringing people closer together.
The highlight of the show was a live interactive satellite link-up between American and Russian rock bands.
So the idea came up with Woz to do a satellite exchange with the Soviet Union. And this was 1982, 83, right? So it was Ronald Reagan, evil empire days, where the Soviet Union was the evil empire, and there was almost no contact between the two countries.
There is sin and evil in the world, and we're enjoined by Scripture and the Lord Jesus to oppose it with all our might. Soviet leaders have openly and publicly declared that the only morality they recognize is that which will further their cause, which is world revolution. They are the focus of evil in the modern world.
And so we actually did a satellite exchange with the Soviets, and it was really cool.
Hi, we're coming to you from the US Festival 1983 in Southern California. We're very near the site of the 1984 Olympic Games where the world cultures will meet in 1984. Okay, on the screen behind me, you'll see some of our friends over in the Soviet Union and US Festival representative Jim Hickman.
In the tent, it was basically about 100 people sitting on a set of stages with a moderator in the front, and the same thing in the Soviet Union. So they would just ask questions, uncensored, uncontrolled in a lot of sense. So, they were talking about sex and life, and then astronauts talking about what it's like to be out in space looking at the world as one place. That's one place. It's not a country set aside over here, a country set aside as one world.
Australian rock superstars met at Woz tens of thousands in California before they transmitted live across the world to Russia.
I think somebody probably told me that they were going to do that, and so I was aware of it. So when I saw it happening, it was great. It was very heartwarming, really. And they looked so innocent and kind of like this was the first time they'd done something like this, It was exciting. As an old hippie, it's kind of like, we're touching people who live in a much more repressive system than what I've grown up with, so we're getting somewhere, hopefully. The US Festival didn't quite end the Cold War, and just like Woodstock, it lost a lot of money. The legacy of the 1960s music festivals remained a formula for financial ruin, especially in the US, where one-off festivals struggled to take root. It wasn't until the 1990s that a new formula for festival success made its way across the US.
Lollapalooza. Lollapalooza was a brilliant innovation, taking the wild musical lineups of European festivals and putting them back on the flatbed truck. Lollapalooza took the whole festival on tour from town to town across the country.
The US has kind of had such a sour history on festivals, whereas Europe has been developing and refining and creating these amazing long-term festivals. I've heard people say it, like nobody will ever be able to create back then a European-style festival in the US until Lollapalooza. Lollapalooza was a touring festival. It really was a game changer. So what if we just have a whole bunch of really cool bands and travel around the country? You could feel it on tour too. You could feel it. People were just so excited.
Not political, it's Lollapalooza. It's very political, but it's on a unity tip. It gives people exposed to what I'm liking is exposed to me to what other people are liking. We got some fans from overseas. That's being a trip for you. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. You see that pitch going, everybody going crazy, loving it.
No one expected this buzz and excitement. And afterwards, the industry changed. All of a sudden, the record companies all started dumping tons of money into these multi-stage rock shows or festivals. And there was this big bloom.
The return of festival culture led to the return of the big one, Woodstock. 30 years after the original, and relocated from a farmer's field to a military base 100 miles away, this festival was Woodstock in name only.
Are gathering at a foreign military base in Rome, New York, to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Woodstock. They came to relive the magic of the original festival, which shaped to be the party of the century.
Woodstock 99 was the antithesis of Lollapalooza It was seemed to be very financially motivated, and that permeated the entire event. It was frustrating, and I remember kind of intentionally not interacting with the audience. And I stayed backstage, stayed in the bus. It wasn't inviting. You put a bunch of people on cage and started charging them a bunch of money. ATMs broke and people couldn't afford water. Are you motherfuckers ready to get the tension out of your body? Well, we could tell something was going wrong, but the show's going on. I'm focused on the band. Are you motherfuckers ready to get the tension out of your body? I remember one of the texts happened to me and looking back, and you could see billowing smoke, like far away though, like out in the middle of the field there. The delay cluster had been pushed over and they lit the PA on fire.
I was in charge of that last ball part, so that was the first ball that actually collapsed during all the riots. And I remember people ripping the walls down, pulling panels off, and just absolute chaos. I'm over there and I see these kids had brought in a Mercedes. It's like an older kind of like 80s style Mercedes, and they're jumping on it, and one of them's got a door and he's just trying to pry it open, and they're just destroying this thing, trying to set it on fire. I'm trying to like move people back away from it, and that was the kind of the culmination of everything. I remember like trying to move people back, and I'm getting like punched. I remember getting hit by a bottle. I got hit with a bunch of objects that I'm gonna imagine are stones, and they just swallowed me up. And I remember thinking like, I'm gonna die in this place.
3 days of peace and music ended in riots and arson. Woodstock 99 saw hordes of young people rampaging through the festival grounds, tearing down barricades, setting fires, and looting vendors. 5 people were injured in the chaos before the state police moved in and made 7 arrests.
Woodstock 99 was a marketing event. It was like, we're going to make a lot of cash. We'll throw a bunch of bands in there. We're going to tag a name on it from a historical event. And I think that was the fundamental of the backlash and violence that happened.
The disaster that was Woodstock 99 left a bad taste in pretty much everyone's mouths. The music festival had worked from a celebration of peace and love and free milk to a staging ground for violence and shameless profiteering. It was pretty much the end for large-scale music festivals in the United States. But there were a few true believers, promoters and entrepreneurs who had faith that they could revive the original spirit of festivals. They did so not by clinging to the culture of Y2K, but by looking back to the ethos of the 60s and returning to the music festival's roots. They believed that it wasn't where you built a home, but how you built it.
We actually all went to the first Coachella, and that was right after Woodstock 99 had happened. I remember them, they gave out bottles of water as you walked in, and it was a clear sign of trying to be the antithesis of, the Woodstock 99 stuff that had happened. I think it pushed people to really produce on a higher level. We built on it. It was like, what do we want to experience? We were kind of building it for ourselves. We'd been to Glastonbury. We had seen just some of the great, European festivals, and we're like, well, what would our modern day music festival look and feel like? We were able to kind of create that. We were very fortunate to build something out that was a reflection of ourselves. And I think ultimately was one of the reasons why it was successful is that we weren't building it for some far-off audience that we didn't understand. We just knew these are the types of things that we wanted to experience. These are the acts we wanted to see. And these are the type of environments that we wanted to be in. And we kind of created it from there. We've been doing these big murals where we have local artists doing live painting throughout the event. And we keep the murals every year. And then we just started noticing that year that so many more people started to take pictures of themselves with the murals. And it became this huge thing where now we always keep them in there. We put them up all throughout the site, and we're just taking selfies all day long. I think selfies are a way for people to express themselves. And like most things, it's like everything in moderation. If it starts to take away from your experience, you probably shouldn't be doing it. I think when you get that many people together for these short bursts, it's almost like, going to a rally, whether it's a women's march, something like that. Having all these people together for a singular purpose is just extremely powerful. Music is a really easy way for people to connect with the present moment. You're just absorbing and listening. That is the best way to connect with people.
I remember the last time we played Bonnaroo, I got to know the tour manager, got myself into The Killers. I thought I should just watch. I want to see it. And then we got to the side stage. Mr. Brightside, not a favorite song of mine. They came out and opened it. Might have been the greatest song I saw live. Okay, discovering music is the best part about being a band or being an audience member at festivals. And the festivals that go out of their way to present And that's what social scene we got a lot of. We got a lot of festivals saying we want your music at our festival and we're going to present you to our crowd. It's pretty phenomenal. There is something about just being outdoors and just being able to just have no ceiling over you. On a metaphorical level, it's pretty prominent, but just in terms of the level of experiencing that moment, sometimes you gotta get out from underneath the ceiling and just have open sky. Get together with a group at a mass, you feel a sense of belief, you feel a sense of purpose, and you feel like there's a drive towards something greater. And a lot of the times, you need to be in mass crowds to feel that feeling. You're feeling it. That's yours. And then you're owning that with a crowd. And that's the experience of live music.
Organizers, the rewards at the music festival are clear. They're now a huge business and the front line of live music promoting. But why have they stood the test of time with music fans and concert goers? How have festivals become not just popular, but more popular than ever? What is it about these gatherings that sparks something deep in our souls?
It's amazing what all this I'm 50,000 happy people can do, yeah?
The beauty of the music festival is that, rather than just, 2,000 people singing along, it's like 50,000 people singing along, and that is very powerful and very seductive. There's quite a powerful kind of mob or collective feeling, which is great. I think the function of the music festival in today's age is important because it's a space for people to step outside of their work and life routines and just drink and partake in drugs, dance and listen to music and just take yourself off the grid for a weekend. Am I allowed to talk about drug taking? All right, then, of course. Interact with people via a computer screen. There's not much in real time kind of communication. Whereas the thing about a festival is that it's everyone together in this moment. I think that as life becomes increasingly atomized, I think it's important to have these spaces where you can just go and just freak out.
People gather together to find a harmonious focus, whether it's 2 people or 200,000 people, all focused on the exact same thing at the exact same time. There's a sensation that we derive from it. You can get lost in that energy.
The need for human beings to have these big gatherings. There's something so deep rooted in our DNA that we have to share these experiences. And there's something about that kind of shared experience, which you can't write it or code it. It's just something about being in that moment.
I think at its best form, it helps us to raise our consciousness and to be better people, to be more who you are. There's a current which is its form that's electric and it goes out and it comes back and it's unbroken. That's the high of connection with people. That's what it is. There's nothing more to it than that because we all end up the same way. It's kind of how do you make sense of where we are? The fact that we're just this rock flying around the fucking sun. What the fuck is going on? Oh, we're alive. Okay.